restaurants and author of The Capitalist Comeback, Andy Puzder, joins us right now. Andy, good to see you.
Good to see you, Lauren. Thank you.
What do you make of President Trump right now pushing Republicans to become the party of health care? Haven't we tried this before?
Well, we haven't tried it this way before. I think this is great. Look, Obamacare was supposed to reduce the cost of health insurance. It was supposed to reduce the cost of health care. They both soared. They both gone way up. There's only one thing that improves quality and reduce costs, and that's competition. When you put the government into the process, competition goes away, prices go up, quality goes down. So I think it's exactly the right approach. We want to lower costs. We want less government involved. We want more competition involved. And that's exactly the mantle that Republicans can assume. This is exactly what Republicans stand for. So I think it'd be great. If we can be the party of health care, I think that'll be a real positive for the American people.
Andy, this is Jonas Ferris. I agree with, broadly speaking, everything you just said would describe any system. But with health care, since the Republicans seem to want to keep the popular pre-existing conditions rule from Obamacare, how does that ever jive with any kind of free market? I mean, someone could walk in and need hundreds of thousands of dollars of something, and you have to provide it at a relatively low cost and with no limit. How would that ever work without government backstops or taxes or something? It's like if someone went to one of your old restaurants and you had to serve them an unlimited amount of food for $5, not just one burrito or whatever. I mean, how does it work?
Well, I would say that, look, when you're talking about competition, the government can make requirements that all competitors have to meet. So everybody would be competing on the same basis. Everybody would have to offer coverage that covered pre-existing conditions. There's a great system that could be used as an example. It's the system in Singapore. Singapore has the best healthcare results in the world, and it also has the lowest percentage of GDP spent on healthcare in the world. And they do it through competition, through health savings accounts, through doctors having ratings. They're rated like Uber drivers. You know, you get to rate your doctor, and then they list their prices. So you can be price selective, you can be doctor selective, you get a health savings account. It's actually your money. You can leave it to your children. So there's always an incentive to get a lower cost for health care, and the system works incredibly well. It could work here, and they cover pre-existing conditions in Singapore. But
it must be broad mandated coverage. You can't just walk in once you have an expensive condition and then get health insurance, right? How would that ever work even in Singapore in a good system like that?
No, everybody does have coverage. You're exactly right. And you actually have to pay more for, everybody has coverage, but you have to pay, always have to pay a percentage, a certain percentage of whatever procedure you get. When you're young, you pay a higher percentage. When you're older, you pay a lower percentage. But everybody always has an iron in the fire. Everybody always has an investment in keeping costs down. So it's a system that works very. Sean Flynn, a friend of mine who's an economist in California, has a book coming out on this in June, and I'm hoping people will pay a lot of attention to it.
Thank you.
Andy, this is Gary here. I couldn't agree more that the free market works, and it works in healthcare, and that's been proven. Just one fact, for example, LASIK eye surgery, which is, I guess, 99% of the time elective, and doctors compete, was $2,200 per eye in 1998. Now it's $300 per eye, so it can work. But here's the problem. The government and large organizations like the AMA limit supply, and the insurance companies, on the other hand, increase demand. How are you going to break up the Aetnas of the world, these large hospitals of the world that, quite frankly, want to keep high prices ingrained in us? How do you get to that free market? That's the question.
By forcing them to compete with other hospitals and other insurers. Once they're competing, once the government opens up the market and allows competition, just like it did with the airlines. You know, remember, we didn't have Southwest. We didn't have these discount airlines years ago. Everybody paid a lot. When you open up the field so those entities have to compete with other entities on a level playing field, you're going to see prices go down and you're going to see quality go up.
Okay, hang on, Andy. You're equating deregulation in the airline industry with something, I don't know what, in the healthcare industry. The problem is that we never had a right to fly in airplanes. What we did was deregulated airlines, and the prices came down, and more people flew. That's absolutely true. But in your opening comment, you left one thing out about one of the goals of the Affordable Care Act, which was to get millions of more people insured, which it did. I still don't understand what we're talking about here. What is the Republican plan? Is there an it that we're talking about?
Well, there are a lot of first of all, the example I used with the airlines was an example not to compare flying on a plane to healthcare. It was to compare what can happen when large companies have to compete. How that affects the industry that they have.
But Gary
to be
asked
in.
you, large companies do compete in healthcare. There's a bunch of large companies
what
that
market
compete.
are you in? I'm in Tennessee.
I don't know, the large health insurance
there's like
companies.
one plan you can have. Yeah, I mean, you can get one plan.
Okay, that doesn't make any sense, but go ahead.
Is dead.
Uh-huh.
Anyway.
I don't know, United Healthcare, Kaiser, I'm no expert on this stuff. The list goes on and on. Plus all of the exchanges in the Affordable Care Act.
No, they compete for private sector business. That's absolutely true. And that's why private sector insurance is so much better than anything you can get on Obamacare. You go into most markets, there's one insurer. Some markets were faced with no insurer. I mean, there's not competition under Obamacare. There's competition under the system that existed before Obamacare that insured most people.
Andy, I think if I could interrupt 1 second, it's Liz.
Sure.
I think you're totally right. I think transparency, competition, all that's going to work. How can they possibly cobble together a bill in time for the 2020 election? Let's just be political here. This cannot possibly happen. I can't imagine this.
Well, I tell you, there are groups that are working on bills. John Goodman's group does a very good job. Tom Price is working with the Job Creators Network. There are groups that are working now to come up with a bill. The question is, can Republicans come together behind a bill? I'm hopeful that they can. I thought the Senate bill that didn't pass by one vote was actually a pretty good bill. I hope they would modify that. They could improve it. And get behind something like that. I hope they do that before the election. There are bills out there. There are groups working on this, and they should cobble it together and get behind it.
Well, Senator Cassidy certainly working on it. Again, the other issue, though, Andy, is that Americans are used to Obamacare now and the system that we have. So it would be changing it once again. Andy, we thank you very much for your time today. Have a good weekend.
My pleasure. Thank you, Lauren.
Okay. Well, Lyft shares soaring.